The following is a presentation on A Farewell to Arms written by Ernest Hemingway in 1929. In order to fully understand, appreciate, and enjoy this novel, you're going to need a little bit of background information and a whole lot of context. Hopefully, this presentation will provide that for you and enrich your reading experience. Before we continue, you're going to need the following materials: your regular notebook, something to write with, and a quiet setting so you can focus and concentrate on the presentation. Feel free to pause and copy notes from the PowerPoint and then resume play to listen to my explanations. If you're ready and you have everything, we can continue. World War I. A Farewell to Arms takes place during World War I. So it's important that we get a little bit of background information. In 1914, Franz Ferdinand, the Archduke of Austria, was assassinated by Yugoslavian nationalist Gavrilo Princip. Austria demanded that Serbia take action in response, to which Serbia refused. This led to a tangle where many European countries felt they needed to choose sides. And this situation was known as the Balkan Powder Keg, which you should have heard about in your world history courses. Serbia, Russia, France, Britain, Italy, Japan, and the US made up the Allied forces, while on the opposite side, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire made up the Central Powers. The Allied forces would eventually go on to win World War I. Modernism. Modernism was a literary and artistic movement that stretched from the late 1800s to the mid 1900s. Hemingway was one of the biggest and most influential figures of the modernist movement. To an extent, modernism was a reaction to the horrors of World War I. The movement was artists' and thinkers' attempts to break free from tradition and long-held beliefs. Many believed that failing to question old traditions and ways of thinking led to World War I, because countries escalated against each other rather than thinking of alternatives. A Farewell to Arms is modernist to the extent that it questions why we look up to leaders who drive us to war, portrays soldiers as regular humans rather than action heroes, and criticizes the naivete or innocence of those who look up to soldiers or warriors. The Hemingway hero. The typical Hemingway hero was a man who was irreparably damaged by the world, but never fully defeated. You're going to see a lot of these type of characters throughout Hemingway's books. And this is because Hemingway modeled many of his narrators after his own life. Hemingway had incredible life experiences and lived through some incredibly influential moments in world history. So, for example, Hemingway volunteered to be an Italian ambulance driver in World War I. He was badly wounded and received the Italian Silver Medal of Bravery at age 18. This is a kid from Illinois who, at age 18, decided to drop everything and join the Italian army because he wanted to see the world and he wanted to see what the world had to offer, and he wanted to help. As a journalist, Hemingway reported on the Spanish Civil War, liberation of Paris, Greek Revolution, and World War II. He was also present at D-Day for the Normandy invasion. He was everywhere. Some more interesting facts about his life that influenced the personality of his narrators. Hemingway was a celebrity in Spain for his deep passion for and understanding of bullfighting. He enjoyed big game hunting in Africa, and during his travels, he survived 2 plane crashes. And he also enjoyed big game fishing in the Gulf of Mexico, and he used his personal fishing boat to help the U.S. spy on Russian submarines during the Cold War. This is an incredible man who lived a wild life, and these experiences helped to inform his writing. In order to fully understand some aspects of this novel, you're going to need to understand Hemingway's iceberg theory. He gave these following quotes about his writing. If a writer of prose knows enough of what he is writing about, he may omit things, cut things out that he knows, and the reader, if the writer is writing truly enough, will have a feeling of those things as strongly as though the writer had stated them. Essentially, if you're reading and you're living in the moment, Hemingway should be able to leave out little bits of plot and you should be able to understand that they happened. So he goes with the metaphor of an iceberg. He said the dignity of movement of an iceberg is due to only 1/8 of it being above water. A writer who omits things because he does not know them only makes hollow places in his writing. So if he intentionally leaves out an event and the rest of his writing is good enough, you should be able to pick up on it. He also says that if a writer leaves things out or leaves bits of information out or leaves aspects of personality out because they haven't thought of them, that's just a bad writer. Hemingway said you could omit anything if you knew that what you omitted and the omitted part would strengthen the story and make people feel something more than they understood. Once again, it's this idea that if you are reading and living in the moment and feeling the book, you're going to understand these things. So Hemingway gives the example of an iceberg. He uses this as a metaphor. So look at this picture of an iceberg. In real life, the majority of an iceberg is actually underwater, and only a little bit pokes out on top. So compare this to his writing. There's going to be a sex scene in the novel that Hemingway doesn't actually write about. He shows two characters lying in bed and having a romantic conversation, and then there's a quick cut. Now, based on our understanding of these two characters, it should be very obvious that he's cutting out or leaving out a sex scene without actually having to write about it. This is an example of the iceberg theory. The iceberg theory ties into Hemingway's writing because he's renowned for his short, powerful writing. He once placed a bet among other writers that he could write a short story in 6 words. He won that bet. He won that bet by writing the following story. For sale. Baby shoes, never worn. This story is a powerful example of the iceberg theory because we can imagine the excitement of the parents to have a child, right? Because they buy the shoes in preparation, as well as their heartbreaking pain when their child dies during childbirth, which is why they are selling them in a newspaper. You get that from where it says for sale, even though Hemingway never once mentions them. Look at that sentence again. He never says anything about parents. He never says anything about pregnancy, and he never says anything about death, but yet we can understand that because we're in the moment. Finally, another thing that complicates Hemingway's writing for some readers is his dialogue without attribution. He liked to keep his work short and punchy. He felt that constantly naming people and writing that blah said blah takes you out of the moment. So a number of the dialogues in the book do not state who is saying which line. This requires you to live in the moment and visualize the characters speaking to each other. If this is difficult for you, if you struggle to figure out who's saying what, try reading the passage out loud to yourself in different voices. That should help you keep track.